an idea about that the copyright system as we know it is not necessarily adequate in the digital environment. That copyright hinders to some degree sharing, and that with the advent of the internet, a lot of people start using copyrighted materials who are not necessarily motivated by commercial interests. They do not necessarily do that as their primary job, but it's something like they share materials online, they want other people to access that, and that the copyright system, which always, for every act of sharing, for every act of reproduction or publication, requires permission from the rights holder, is not very well suited. It was set up by an American law scholar, or a bunch of American law scholars, but the most prominent among them was someone called Larry Lessig, who taught at Stanford at the time. And he had just argued a case lost a case in the United States Supreme Court, in which he had lost the argument of a client of his who had said that the most recent extension of the term of copyright protection has been unconstitutional. Those of you who've been here yesterday, I've showed this term, the copyright clause from the US Constitution, which basically says Congress has the right to pass a temporary monopoly in order to advance useful arts and sciences. And he argued that if Congress extends and extends and extends the duration of copyright, that is not temporary. That would be unconstitutional. He lost that case, pretty much to his surprise, because he thought that it was a solid argument. And in their frustration with the fact that they thought more and more culture would be locked away for longer and longer, he and his client, or basically his client, encouraged him to come up with a system how he could, for those people who weren't interested in these dynamics, how he could come up with a system that allowed people to share. This is around the turn of the millennium, so this is where like the potential, especially to academics in the US, or people in the US university system, like the potential of the internet was clear. That this was like the platform for access to culture, for sharing of information, and I guess they've been completely right about that. And so they set up this organization, this non-profit organization, which started by publishing a couple of licenses. Creative Commons is much more than publishing a couple of licenses, and I'm going to come to the licenses in a second. It says, as an organization, our vision is nothing less than realizing the full potential of the internet, universal access to research and education, full participation in culture to drive a new era of development, growth, and productivity. So there is that is almost like if you read that with a expensive interpretation, that's almost calling for like a revolution, a change of fairly fundamental ideas how we run our societies. But of course, that reflects very much this idea that scarcity in terms of access to information is gone with the combination of digital means of production and a digital distribution system which reaches not everywhere, but pretty much like, I mean, it's rapidly expanding, and it's not very difficult to imagine a world where almost everyone has access to the internet. So Creative Commons wants to work on that, and now going back from this massive ambition that the organization has to the tools, or the first tools that Creative Commons employed is, so in the beginning they drafted 6 licenses. And licenses is, I don't think we've really touched on that, but in copyright, like licensing is the principal way of granting somebody else permission to do something with your work. There's other ways, you can assign copyrights to someone else, but generally a license is, the copyright holder license you, someone else, to do something. And it's usually a document, usually a specific document, which you go to a lawyer to draft one for you. And that's the way you work with, you basically enable others to use your copyrighted works. Generally, I think if you speak to, or if you want to have like a general advice to copyright holders, is that you should always insist on the most specific license that you can have. So if you're licensing something away, you often find like for example, your publisher or your record company offering you a license, and they tend to be incredibly broad. Like, I mean, they profit if they can do everything with it. A good lawyer in this field probably tries to achieve for his or her client in copyright cases a very narrow license that may have even terms that after a certain period rights come back to the creator, or for very specific users, or for very specific territories. So that's the general licensing practice. Like, you try to be, and that is aimed, like these advice to be specific and to be not more extensive than required, is really aimed at professional creators who make their living out of these rights that they have in their works, and you want to be careful in what you give away if that is your if that is your way of making your living. And these Creative Commons licenses, they are different. Like, they are standardized licenses. This is I hope that's readable on that screen. So this is the most liberal license we have. They basically go against all this advice which I just said. And what this license says, and you can say it here, is you, the public, so you encounter something on the internet which carries this license, and the license says to you, so it's specific not to a record company or a publisher or someone, but it's a public license. It's a license towards everybody out there, like, who encounters this world, and it basically says you are free to share, to copy and redistribute the material in any medium or format, to adapt it, to remix, transform, and build upon the material for any purpose, even commercially. The licensor cannot revoke these freedoms as long as you follow the license terms. And then there's one condition in this case. We have licenses with more conditions, so this is the most liberal one, which says if you give attribution, you must give appropriate credit, provide a link to the license, and indicate that if changes were made. You may do so in any reasonable manner, but not in any way that suggests the licensor endorses you or your use. So this violates basically everything that I just recommended about standard licensing practice. And why would you want to do this? This is really crafted for somebody who wants to share, right? Like, where the motivation is not so much, I have these rights, I've generated them to feed my family from them, to pay my rent or anything, but where people say, like, I made this and I want the world to make use of that. There's situations that all of you will be extremely familiar with. Wikipedia, for example, Wikipedia is available under a license which is very similar. Actually, it's one step up from this license. But so people who contribute to Wikipedia do not do this for commercial gain. They do not, like, they also do that to some limited terms for personal recognition. Like, they don't even need to be like, this is my individual work. Wikipedia has this very complicated system. If you dive into it, you can see every edit is attributed to someone. But I think the general motivation is to contribute to a common good, to the commons for people who do Wikipedia. There's lots of photographers on lots of different platforms, Flickr being the most important one, who make their images available under conditions like these, who are in most cases probably not commercial photographers, but who really thrive by the idea that the photos they make are not only used by themselves but are used in public. Wikipedia then uses these photos to illustrate Wikipedia articles, others use them. So it's this idea of contributing to the commons. And for most of creativity, that is, or it depends, but most of works that are in the sense of copyright that are produced these days, this is probably the driving motivation for people making material. They want people to share that. Even on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, what's the currency in that? It's these likes and hearts that you get, and that indicates, what does that indicate? Other people are looking at your stuff, other people are enjoying that, and you don't get paid for this. And I guess 99.999% of the people on Instagram are not professional photographers, right? They do this they have other means to generate an income. Some of them do, but the majority doesn't do that. So these Creative Commons licenses are a bit of a strange beast in the terms of copyright, but in the terms of how most people currently produce culture, like they are not so strange at all. Like they are reflecting like what's on many platforms in many